advance sustainability, and in honor of your renewed commitment formally to sustainability, a commitment that you have demonstrated through your actions over the years. And I want to offer some ideas about where this work can take us into the future, and not just around environmental sustainability, but also social sustainability and sustaining our communities through the work that we do. I'd like to dedicate this talk to Helen Skinner because when I first started gardening in the early 90s, it was Helen's writing that was profoundly influential to me. And I'm trying to remember, where these articles appeared. I'm sure I've got them in my files, in that filing cabinet that's in the basement, that I need to take a look at again. But so much information that you have shared over the years. So I want to thank you, Helen, for all that you do. I'd also like to place this talk in the context of one of the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report, where it talks about the need to reconcile with nature and the natural world, and that reconciliation won't be complete without reconciling with the natural world. And I think that that is something that we do when we garden. Okay, I'm taking the big step. I'm doing it. You guys have really helped my bravery here. Thank you. Reconciling with nature is something that gardening can really encourage us to do. It's what we do. We're digging in the dirt. We're engaging with the earth. We're building relationships with all the insects and the other creatures that we see and engage with when we garden. So I'm just going to see if I can get my computer a little closer. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so I've written a number of books mainly about gardening with native plants, but also some sort of more general gardening books, and as Christine and Rosemary mentioned, this is the new book that I have coming out. There's postcards for it up at the table there, where I also have some books, not this most recent one. It'll be out in later on in May. But basically, the thread that has run through all of the work that I've been doing around gardening, and I think we can see it in our own projects, is that gardening is a land-based activity that connects with everything. It's not separate from everything that's happening in the world. And what an amazing demonstration we have of this today with this amazing floral display, which connects us with something that is happening, something quite dire that's happening in the world. So gardening is not separate. And I know that for many of us, our gardens are a place of retreat and escape and refuge. They're places that bring us comfort. But I'm hoping that while these places can feel like refuges from the outside world, we can also at the same time contemplate actions to make the world a better place while we're in our places of refuge. And I think there's a long tradition of gardeners doing that, obviously making the world a better place. And I want to just mention a couple of them, of course, gardeners and the sustainability, the gardener and gardening's connection with sustainability movements over the years. One that comes to mind is the organic movement. Gardeners were key to not just encouraging the organic movement, but also then advocating for pesticide bylaws, which have had such an incredibly positive impact. Or gardeners and sustainability movements like the work that the Master Gardeners of Ontario are doing right now to really try to spread awareness about the invasive species that are causing such ecological harm that are commonly available in the nursery trade. And so the master gardeners are trying to spread information about that and help and I think their end goal, of course, is to get those invasive species out of the horticultural trade. Of course, gardeners and sustainability, it's second nature for many of us in terms of the composting, but gardeners had such a profound impact on the composting movement, and I want to acknowledge here Mark Cullen and his work. And we did a book together in the early 90s about composting. Mark really led the charge on this to not only to remind all of us about the importance of compost to soil health, but then to encourage municipalities. Like when we wrote this book, no municipality in Ontario was collecting organic waste, recycling organic waste. It's almost impossible to think about that right now, isn't it? That we used to throw out our organic waste, or we call it waste. So that's something that gardeners have been very involved in. Of course, a sustainability movement that gardeners have either led or been deeply involved in. Another one is the native plant movement, and as a sustainability movement. Because, and as a movement that's going to take us into the future, because literally our health depends on it. The health of the world, the functioning of the world, the ecological functioning, depends on the web of connection between species, which is basically what biodiversity is, the webs of connection. And those webs of connection are supported and actually based on native plants, the co-evolved relationships, particularly between insects and native plants. And that's the foundation of the Earth's functioning. And we're in a crisis, and so the gardeners and for sustainability, and in thinking about this, and in thinking about the pollinator crisis, it takes us to the importance of creating habitat and being involved with creating habitat. Of course, some gardeners are leading the fight in a different way, in that they've had to fight for their right to naturalize. Again, it's almost impossible, isn't it, to imagine that this garden, and sorry it's a little bit cut off, it was in 1994 that Sandy Bell had to go to court twice, in fact. She lost the first time for this garden. I photographed this garden while she was in court in the 90s, and she lost, and then she appealed it and won the constitutional right to a quote-unquote natural garden. That's thanks to that court case and this garden. Douglas Counter, another seminal, groundbreaking court case in the early 2000s, he had to defend this garden, this tallgrass prairie native plant garden, which again, to us now, I'm hoping there is nothing that is frightening or illegal looking about this garden, but Douglas had to defend it right up to the Ontario Superior Court, where the right that he won for all of us is the right to express our environmental beliefs on the public right-of-way, the boulevard here. So Douglas won us all that right to express his environmental values, so it was a constitutional case, and it's quite amazing. Miriam Mouton in Coburg is fighting a similar battle, although not a court case, but she was a counselor. You can see her boulevard, her native plant boulevard, right by the fire hydrant. It's not tall so that it's obstructing the street views or views of cars. And this is during a drought. And look at what's happening to the turf grass in the boulevards without the water. And look what's happening in Miriam's boulevard of native plants. And imagine being an insect. Imagine being a bee. Imagine being a pollinator. Imagine being one of the creatures that runs the planet, and the experience of this landscape. But Miriam had to defend it The Coburg, town of Coburg cut it down 3 times. Yeah, but there have been advances in that then the town of Coburg actually asked her for photographs of, more recently, for photographs of her boulevard to include them in their Communities in Bloom application. Progress. But unfortunately, this garden, Beth and Craig Sinclair's garden in Smiths Falls, they are involved in a court case right now for their garden. It's a bit hard to see in the top there, the top photograph of their garden, but what they're being charged, and they took every step possible to try to avoid appealing the town to court. They did every possible way, you know, through their counselors, through committees, through special hearing. They were told to remove their habitat logs. And you see the pileated woodpecker that is using that, on the bottom right there, that's using that habitat log. They have naturalized their yard. It's almost exclusively native plants. There are no safety hazards whatsoever. And the town wasn't asserting there were any safety hazards. The town was just saying, nurse logs are waste under their grass and weeds bylaw. And it's probably a bit hard to see the letter that the town sent to them saying, that's waste, remove them. And the Sinclairs put their foot down and said, you know what, it's habitat. We need to create habitat. No safety hazards whatsoever, and no assertion of weeds, anything. They've called the native plants weeds. So gardeners are fighting these kinds of battles in order to be able to be a part of the sustainability movement to create pollinator habitat and to protect pollinators, which is something that gardeners, oh, I'm glad that isn't mine. I think I haven't turned off mine. No, cool, thank you. And this is one, I think one of the most hopeful things I have seen in the last couple of years, but it really feels like right now especially, is the way that gardeners in particular are forming groups. It seems like every town, because have this book coming out in the spring, I was looking for pollinator groups to send a press release to and tell them about the book. Every single town and city has a pollinator stewardship group now, which is amazing. And it's led, for the most part, by gardeners, people who want to actually dig in and put native plants in the ground to support pollinators. And that is such an incredible, hopeful thing, because, of course, we all know that I'm just going to just even mention briefly the terrible loss of biodiversity in terms of the pollinators, in terms of the bees in particular, a number of species that are declining, and in terms of some of the butterfly species, but we don't even think, there's so little known scientifically about pollinators like the wasps. Very important. I know as gardeners we go right to those, is it the paper wasps who show up in the fall and are attracted to our sugary drinks? It's not the plants, it's not the habitat. Although they are doing important work pollinating, it's not like, well, if you didn't have habitat, you wouldn't have wasps. The wasps are there for the paper wasps in particular, but there are thousands of species of wasps. And they're crucial. They're pollinators. They're pest control. At any rate, I went off on a bit of a tangent there, I think. Native bees. We depend on the pollinators for food. All creatures depend. You know that saying, a third of the food we eat is thanks to pollinators? I would really like to focus. I think that's important, and it's very, it has a lot of impact as a statement. Well, let's also, at the same time, think about the fact that it's probably 2/3 of all the food that all of the other creatures eat depends on insects. So it's not just about humans, it's the whole shebang. What I want to turn to now is a little bit of history, and how gardeners responded to crisis, and the crisis then of wars, and during the Depression, the crisis of poverty, and the way that gardeners responded with action on a scale that almost seems inconceivable now. And I'll get to some of those details. And not only that, but they responded by inspiring other people to become gardeners. So sharing that gardening knowledge, sharing that enthusiasm and information to participate in food growing in response to crisis. And they helped educate non-gardeners to become gardeners. And I want to start with a quote from the Globe and Mail from June 8th in 1943, when an article on victory gardening said, "All over Toronto, many a head is bowed over the weeds, many a back is bent over the hoe in backyards and on vacant lots these sunny evenings and weekends. Soon there will be homegrown vegetables in tables in many parts of town, and they will taste like the food of the gods." This article is actually about the mayor of the time, Mayor of Toronto, Fred Convoy, and he is tending his onion patch behind his home on Bloor Street while speaking with the reporter. The flowers that were in his border have been replaced with tomatoes, and his lawn with potatoes, and the mayor in the article is encouraging everyone to dig for victory. People everywhere responded to the call. The police and the firemen at the village, Forest Hill Village Station, they cut patches out of their lawn, and the Globe and Mail described it as they used any time off they could spare from upholding the law and keeping firefighting equipment in tip-top condition to grow tomatoes, radishes, and kale, and more. Groups like the Ontario Hydro Horticultural Club, so many, companies, agencies, etc., had horticultural committees at that time, victory garden committees. So the Ontario Hydro one cultivated 425 gardens in Toronto alone. There were 750 of these Ontario Hydro gardens throughout the province on land that was donated by the municipalities and private owners, and they grew $26,000 worth of food in 1943, which has if you compare it to today's dollars, it has the purchasing power in, $2021 of $400,000. That's a lot of food, and that's a lot of food for people in need. The Community Gardens Association of Toronto, they tended plots on major streets, such as Kale Street and Queen Street. Like, there was food growing throughout the city. The Pinecrest Crescent Joy Club, which was an East End activity club for kids, turned the lawn where they played sports into a 35-foot long victory garden in the shape of a V, which I find pretty amazing. Seed companies were doing a roaring business. There was the Globe, and these excerpts are from a number of different Globe articles that I looked at, throughout the history of the Victory Garden movement and the wars and the Depression. And for one article, one of the guys one of the nursery seed sellers the reporter wanted to talk to said, "We're so busy selling seeds for Victory Gardens that we have no time to even discuss them with you." So all of this labor around food growing and gardening bore incredible results. 52 million kilograms of vegetables grown in Canadian cities in 1943 alone. More than 200,000 wartime gardens. About half of every household that was surveyed said they were or planned to have a victory garden. And of course it was very, connected with patriotic duty, and you can see how kind of what's it called, where we have campaigns, propaganda, or marketing. I'm trying to think of less weighted words, but the campaigns to promote victory gardening also encouraged a lot of people, like this bomb crater in London, England, or the Tower of London moat was used to grow cabbages to inspire people. So, and of course, it also tapped into I think, as gardeners, we all have, and we all tap into it to a different degree, a bit of a competitive instinct. Would you agree? Just a little bit, right? And the Victory Garden movement tapped into that. At this Hydro Commission Harvest Fair, they had, they had prizes for the biggest cabbage, the heaviest tomato, that kind of thing. But there were also policies at the municipal and provincial and federal levels to support people and groups in their effort to grow food. Like municipalities provided land for these efforts. And really what happened is that really a collective culture of cultivation, a collective culture of food growing, a collective culture of gardening was created through that movement in the past, the Victory Garden movement. Even the NFB got into the National Film Board, got into with a really sweet little film. You can see it online. It's from 1943, He Plants for Victory. And Mrs. Plugger, I don't know why they came up with that name, wants to start a victory garden, and Mr. Plugger organizes neighbors to cultivate food in a vacant lot. It's quite a sweet little film. But it really was almost, the garden became a symbol of renewal and abundance during a time of austerity. And that was some of the appeal too. But there was a precedent that went back before World War II, and that was World War I, when the Victory Garden, although at the time they would have been called war gardens in World War I, and the same thing, groups like the Rotary Club, for example, formed vacant lot gardener groups run by the Rotary Club. So in 1918 in Toronto, there were more than 2,000 of these gardens under cultivation. Again, it's just staggering to think. And the Ontario government the Department of Agriculture, produced all kinds of educational materials, really trying to urge a backyard garden for every home, to enlist gardeners in this fight for empire, as they put it. And the Canadian Food Board got involved. Horticultural societies got very much involved. This is in World War I. And then after World War I, there was also that focus was continued on food production and gardens into the Depression due to poverty, of course, and the real crisis of hunger at that time, and the way that people did not have either money or access to food. And again, the mayor of the time, William James, a more familiar mayor than Fred Conboy, got involved turning sod on this, and please remember the location of this garden, on St. Clair, just west of Kiel, so where 5,000 families had access to land to grow food. You can tell I'm a little bit obsessed with victory gardens. This is just a small collection of my books on the subject. The books, I've collected on the subject and read. And if you want to know more, if you're interested in a little more about this history of the Victory Garden movement in Toronto, I wrote an essay in a book called The Edible City, which is all about Toronto and food culture, where I go into a lot more detail about this history of the Victory Garden movement in Toronto. And every now and again, I write or post about victory gardens, and people share stories. And I mentioned that garden at St. Clair and Kiel. Well, lo and behold, someone I know, Ann Ball, she wrote this amazing response to, I posted something about victory gardens, and she wrote this amazing post reminiscing, and this is a family photograph of hers, where her father and her grandparents were actually gardening and growing food in that Victory Garden. So it really connects us. Like there's a direct line, like in the earth, connecting us to these like profoundly disruptive events like war and the Depression, and how people persevered through gardening. So, you know, I'm sure the resonances are clear to the time we're in now. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I wrote an op-ed for the Toronto Star, which was about the parallels between the Victory Gardens of the past and where we are now with the time we're in the present with the pandemic. And that's really what I want to speak. I want to use that as a jumping off point to talk about sustainability into the future. And again, I really want to emphasize that word sustainability. We'd have a long conversation about it, because I've been writing about environmental issues for about 30 or 35 years, and I was very narrowly, for most of that time, have been very narrowly focused on environmental sustainability, but everything is connected. And we will not have environmental sustainability without social justice and equality. It just won't happen. And because everything is connected. And so sustainability in terms of, you know, our community, you know, sustainability of communities and supporting communities into the future as well. I want to talk about that in the kind of present and future-looking part of this talk. There are some critiques of the Victory Garden movement, of course, and for me personally, I know I just don't like the war metaphors. You know, everything is battle, it's a fight, it's you know, join the battalion. I'm an old peacenik. I don't want our language to be infused with that. I don't want us to think about the world in terms of battle, you know. So anyway, but there are other critiques as well. So that when, in response to the pandemic, a group started in the States, they called themselves the Cooperative Gardens Commission. Isn't that so much nicer? And it's amazing the number of gardens and food projects that they started in response to the pandemic. Now we know that one of the things that's happened with the pandemic is that so many people are turning to gardens, right? We can see it everywhere. It's, you know, been the subject of so many newspaper articles. People have turned to gardening for all kinds of reasons, one of which is real need for food. And in the spring of 2020, it was hard to find seeds, it was hard to buy seeds, it was hard to find potting soil, it was hard to find the resources. So think of being a new gardener, worried about where your next mouthful is going to come from, and also not knowing anything about gardening and like where to start, and the resources aren't there. But there are the resources. There are the resources in garden clubs. There are the resources in horticultural societies. So sharing and educating and informing and spreading and spreading resources to the unprecedented rise in interest in gardening. One of my pandemic projects, again, as a way to channel some real fear about where is the world going, where, you know, is there going to be food in the stores? What's happening here? Like, are the supply chains? I started to grow a lot more food, like all over the place, but I also started a Facebook group called Grow Food Toronto, which is, and was joined by Rhonda Title Payne of Toronto Urban Growers and Cheyenne Sundance of Sundance Harvest to co-administer this site, which was basically a support site for new gardeners who wanted to grow food. But it was really about creating a community of mutual aid around food growing. And I can't tell you how many, you know, garden club members, horticultural society members, master gardeners of Ontario have contributed through this site in the most patient and lovely way to new gardeners who are starting out full of fear, really, and trepidation about how to grow food. It was such an important reminder about the way that we as gardeners can share the resource of our knowledge. Like, I'm not even talking about, when I use the word resources today, I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about our passion as gardeners, our knowledge, our understanding, our resources of soil, our knowledge of how to make compost, like all that sort of stuff. Getting it out there. One of the quotes I just want to share from the Star article. It's easy to see why Victory Gardens are so inspiring right now. When you're under siege, everything feels connected to war, even something as benign as gardening. The time is right to fill front yards with food, to discover that insects are necessary for pollination, and to see the connections between our gardens and the local ecology. And it's something I wrote, I guess, out of fear at the beginning of the pandemic, but and kind of worry about the future, but it's something that I continue to feel so strongly now. The time is right. The time is right for all those connections between gardening and the world, gardening and ecology, gardening and our communities, the communities we live in, and the communities of our neighbors. So we kind of put out a challenge through Grow Food Toronto. Let's grow a lot of food. Let's grow it so it gets to those of us who are most vulnerable and marginalized, and so that we have agency over our food sovereignty. And many, this is just one example from Grow Food Toronto, but many groups, gardening groups, community groups, groups that are working on issues around poverty, responded in the same way to the pandemic crisis, and by trying to, or by starting projects that relate to getting food, the growing of food. So for example, I'm thinking of projects like the Lakeshore Environmental Gardening Society in Etobicoke that created a garden, a food garden, and a pollinator garden at the Daily Bread Food Bank. To make that, and the food is donated to the food bank, fresh produce, something that's very hard to find in the food bank. Or this group Greens on Queen in Hespeler in Cambridge that has grown literally tons of food since the beginning of the pandemic in public places for food banks. Or this is not exactly a pandemic example because this project, the Toronto Island Kale Project, was around before the beginning of the pandemic. But it shows the way that food can be grown for community and how unused spaces like this sort of lawn area in front of the Toronto Island Cafe, Maura McIntyre started the Kale Project. And it connects with this long tradition, actually, of Toronto Island's growing food. For example, during World War I, and when they turned a 4-acre plot into growing food, selling it, and donating the money to the Red Cross. This was in World War I. Well, what's happening on the island now every summer is that Maura McIntyre coordinates this kale growing project where in that small plot of land, 18 feet by 24 feet, they literally grow every year 500 pounds of kale. They weigh it. It was a project, it was almost like, Laura's like a, she set it up as an amazing, like with the precision of a scientist, and every, harvest was weighed and it was kept in a log book, and because she was curious, how much kale can you grow in a small spot? And that food goes out to the community. So it's such a lesson in all that we can achieve if we set our mind, if we're interested in it. And I do want to acknowledge, I really want to make this clear, it's a privilege to have the time to grow food, and not everyone even wants to grow food, and it's not like we all have to do it. I guess I'm hoping, though, to inspire with some of the ways that communities, people who want to grow food, can come together if it's enabled, and if we, if municipalities, for example, support them with land, or that's not being used for anything else, or that's just lawn and there's other lawn, and so why not have people growing food who need it, or the way that groups can come together and take the gardening energy that we have and apply it in a kind of, to a social purpose, to a kind of, to the sustainability of our communities and the communities of our neighbors. So we are in the midst of ongoing and intersectionally connected crises. You know, the poverty crisis, and this was so, I mean, it's almost a cliche now to say that the pandemic has brought this to light. They've always been there. These crises have been there for a very long time. And they are on a magnitude of equal to that during times of war and the Depression. And this is not a pandemic statistics. This is based on some research. The first time that food insecurity was really looked at in Canada was a study done by U of T that was released just a few years ago that found that Black households are almost 4 times more likely to be food insecure in Canada than white households. So these crises are ongoing. Crises of poverty, crises of hunger, of food insecurity, etc. So they're ongoing. They're not simply about the pandemic. So I think really the question is, how is it that we can respond in enabling ways? And many of these enabling ways are actually common from the past. So, for example, you know, the way that backyard hens as an aspect of our food sovereignty and food security, totally common up until, and allowed in Toronto until the 80s, but then disallowed for reasons totally not connected with backyard hens. It was part of a big reform of the animal bylaws, which were more about the live chickens in Kensington Market, which were seen as an animal welfare issue. So they just banned even people who had, who were, you know, caring well for backyard hens for food reasons. And I was recently involved in the effort around the pilot project, the hen pilot project in Toronto, and spoke with counselors or assistants in high income areas of Toronto who said quite frankly that in their wards they knew that their constituents would not want to have hens, and so they were voting against allowing people in low income neighborhoods from having food sovereignty. So we need to think about these enabling ways, the ways that we can, the way that we can respond to these crises in a way that allows people their own sovereignty and control. So some of the things we can do and advocate for and support and encourage is turning unused lawn space. So this is an example near me. It's a community center that has this huge area of lawn. No one uses it. Kids don't use it, like it's fenced off. That fence is actually completely around it. There's no access to it. And you think about the way that it could be used for food growing. Again, like with all of the, like if you post somewhere on a Facebook group or whatever saying, hey, who doesn't have space, who want to grow food, but who wants to, you will have a lot of people stepping up. So, you know, we could really support this kind of action. Garden clubs and hort societies could actually be, and master gardeners could be amazing clearinghouses almost, like the places of connection for these, you know, the land and the people who want to garden the land. You know, there could be so many, Toronto Urban Growers has been involved in this a little bit, but you know, garden clubs and hort groups, I think, have the energy and the enthusiasm and the knowledge and sometimes the connections to make a lot of things happen. And so that expertise could be used to get great things off the ground. The movement to normalize, I think one of the things that's a sustainability kind of movement taking us into the future is the normalization of food up front yard food. I can't tell you how many people I encounter who think it's illegal to grow food in the front yard. And and because, it comes up on Grow Food Toronto all the time. People just assume it's illegal because the messages, again, through these grass and weeds bylaws, which are so outdated, so vague, they can be used to capture the widest net. And one of those nets they have been used to capture in the past is front yard food growing in many communities, to the point where people just assume it's illegal. So we need to normalize this, and so that people who either need or want to grow food can, without fear of sanction. And you can do it, of course, ornamentally, if that's your thing. I'm really struck by, and they can be tucked into the tiniest spaces, like that sidewalk tomato growing, or to support or participate in these sorts of yard sharing projects. Like this is an example from Guelph, where people with space they're not looking after make it available for this large-scale food growing. And of course, as you can imagine, these people were reported to bylaw. But again, hort societies and garden clubs or the TPG, there are all these organizations that have influence and power and clout and knowledge and enthusiasm and goodwill and all of the things that you have could use to facilitate this sort of thing. It's just one example. And it can still look conventional, food out front, or it can also look unconventional, but let's not be judgy. These aren't intentional plantings. It's clear, there's food, it's corn. They're growing a corn hedge. Let's open it, let's be generous and acknowledge any style of gardening as a personal choice and decision and love. And that might sound radical, I realize. It might sound a little hard. Really? You want me to accept a brown lawn and a corn hedge that looks like there might be a whole bunch of weeds in there? But I think garden clubs, hort societies, master gardeners just need, you've got radical roots, You think about something like the Casa Loma Wildflower Garden, led by the Garden Club of Toronto. You did that project at a time when there were no public wildflower gardens in Toronto. You made something happen that could be a demonstration for all to see how beautiful native plants are and how they can be used ornamentally. That was so radical. It's still, actually, as my example of the Sinclairs in Smiths Falls makes clear. It's a radical thing. So this idea, some other radical acts that we could encourage and support and facilitate or resource are pollinator gardens like this in traffic circles. And this one also has a little bit of food in it. It's in London. Or free food in public spaces in the form of food forests. And looking at, we love growing fruit trees, right? Well, a food forest project where the community could collect the food. How amazing would that be? It's cared for by gardeners. Or vacant lots, loving these spaces by planting them, like this orchard. It's basically an orchard of street trees in Detroit, or vacant lots that can be used for food growing while they're waiting for the development. Or community orchards like this one at Ben Nobleman Park. Or food bank gardens at churches. There's no end of the creative ways we can do this work or the places we can do this work. Guerrilla gardening at vacant churches. I thought this was super innovative. This guerrilla gardening group last summer this is an abandoned church on St. Clair Avenue, and they salvaged pallets to grow, and pallets that were not treated, untreated wood pallets, but they grew lettuce up through the spaces in between the pallets, so creative. Or native plant giveaways. I think this is something that gardeners, I think there's such a, and I do have to admit, I forgot to bring my phone up to the front here, so I actually don't know what time it is. Could someone let me know? 5:52, okay, so I am wrapping up quickly. Sorry, thank you for that. Yeah, giving away plants, like growing, propagating plants and giving them away. Boulevards, starting projects like what's happening in Mississauga to make this ribbon of habitat. And they're growing thousands of plants to give away, native plants to give away. And of course, I don't think I need to really stress for this crowd why it's so important to plant native plants and why, for sustainability reasons, these are the plants that support these webs of connection. And I do want to stress, I'm not saying that we need to not plant non-native plants. How many negatives is that? What I'm saying is, we need to be planting native plants everywhere. Right? It's not an either or, that's what I mean. And we need to do it for the pollinators and for the bees. And we need hort groups to be doing this so that it's not, and supporting community projects like Project Swallowtail in Toronto, who are doing this as volunteers, who are growing tons of native plants. It's a seed sitter program. So again, a role for a hort group or a garden club to facilitate. Like Project Swallowtail, we just made these seed kits. We gave them to people. It was all set. There was the soil, the potting soil, the seeds, the hardware cloth to protect it in winter. And in the fall, we gave these kits to people who volunteered to be seed sitters, and they just had them in their yard over winter, and then the native plants would germinate in the spring. So what an amazing way, like that's a role hort societies could do, garden clubs could do, such a big help. The twin and the related crises of climate and biodiversity are calling out for the mobilization, I'm going to sneak in that military word, of gardeners. And again, I want to encourage a real kind of thinking about what that word sustainability means, because the starting point we're at right now is a starting point of loss. If you look at anything, if you look at the number of any research on like birds, there are 3 billion fewer birds now than there were in the 70s. That's, you know, in the science literature, that's a study that got widely reported on. The bees, everywhere you look. And so does sustainability mean staying where we're at and going into the future? Or does it mean actually regenerating to create more abundance, more native plants, more insects, more birds? Anyway, that's too heavy for right now. And the twin and related crises of inequality and injustice are calling out for the mobilization of gardeners. And this might sound over the top, but I just want to quickly share this example in Parkdale of the Parkdale People and Pollinators Peace Garden in honor of Parkdale's Black communities. And it was started by Angel Beda, who was working for Parkdale Green Thumbs and was just so gutted by the murder of George Floyd, and saw that the rest of her community was in Parkdale was also very, that murder was a profound impact. And so Angel decided to make this garden, create this garden, which has turned into this tiny space with huge impact in the community. It's in partnership with Project Swallowtail. How could she take it farther, though? By doing things like not only creating this public pollinator garden, but then having a plant giveaway, so that the plants are given to balcony gardeners in Parkdale to grow native plants themselves. Or the plan to create a scholarship for Black youth who are interested in horticulture at Parkdale Collegiate Institute as an extension of this project. So I just want to end by saying that there are so many ways we can dig for victory now. And what that means now, what sustainability, I would suggest, what that means is that we are creating a place of abundance and opportunity and possibility for all. And the seeds that we're nurturing are seeds of opportunity for all people, for all pollinators, for all creatures, for all communities. Thank you very much. Indulging me in a little bit of extra time. I so appreciate it. Oh, I gotta do this again. I gotta get unbrave again. That was awe-inspiring. We enjoyed every minute of your presentation. It's not loud enough. You can't hear? Take your mask off. I know. Oh, yeah. That was awe-inspiring, Lorraine. We enjoyed every minute of your presentation, and we would like to give this as a thank you. Thank you. Okay, and as we move forward as a club, you've given us so many ideas, a whole history of where we've come from and sort of where we're going. It really is absolutely fantastic. I want to hear the whole thing all over again. So we'll be guided by your knowledge and your insights. You've helped us to connect and to be guided by nature, to work with the earth, and to work with each other, to make connections, to establish gardens and victory gardens in our own time. And so your talk has changed our understanding of gardens and the purpose of gardening. So thank you so much. And back to Rosemary. The books that you brought today, which you can purchase. Lorraine has a little section over here on tables that you're welcome to look at. The Canadian Gardener's Guide, a Gardener's Manifesto, City Farmers' Ventures in Urban Food Growing, and one I'm going to gravitate towards is 100 Easy Ways to Grow Native Plants. Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you. And we also question and answer period, but Lorraine will be down there, I'm sure, and if you have some burning questions, I have a couple to ask her. So thanks again, Lorraine. Thank you. I forgot something very important. So Lorraine and fellow gardeners here, you'd be very pleased to know that the Garden Club of Toronto will be creating a new award in horticulture for the growing of native plants.
Wow, that was really inspirational, and I'm delighted that the word sustainability is now part of our vocabulary. I would say 10, 15 years ago, when one of my sons decided to study sustainability, people looked at me with total blank stares. They had no idea what he was going to be studying. So, let me just check what's next on our agenda. I think that I overlooked one very important committee when I was thanking committees for today's meeting. The program committee has swung back into action with wonderful treats and refreshments, and they did a beautiful job. Those little vegetable thank you. Okay, I think it is time now to call on the results of the flower show. This is our first real flower show since January of 2020. So first, I'd like to call on the Horticulture, Deborah Maw, Chair of Horticulture.
Good afternoon, everyone. The result of the hort competition is as follows. There were 43 entries today, and there were 12 entrants. First place, Judy Zinni. Second place, Christine Lewis. And third place, Michael Erdman. There was one entry, well, not an entry, but it's called entry, under education, so thank you for that. And, okay, this is going to be a really tricky part here. Okay, best in show goes to Judy Zinni for her Pulsatilla vulgaris. So you're going to have to go downstairs and see that afterwards. And you can practice pronouncing that word too. And then judge's choice, Judy was very busy today, Judy Zinni. And this is for her Synganium Agability. Maybe later you can help us all with that. So congratulations and thank you for everyone for your interest.
Sue, would you like, Sue Scholl will announce the results of the Floral Design Show.
Okay, we had a very nice show today, and in class 1, we had, it's called Splendor, first Sandra Williamson, second Ellen Clark, third Marie Adams. Class 2, Exaltation, first Darlene Brampton, second Sandra Williamson, third Lil Taggart. Class 3, Delicacy of Spring, first Sandra Williamson, second Marv Betts, third moi, and honorable mention Sandra Radcliffe. And class 4, Spring Fling, first Sandra Williamson, second Lil Taggart, and third Maria Tang. I think there's kind of a trend going here. And in Margaret Dove, no ribbons were given. A judge's choice was chosen for Sandra Williamson for Exaltation, and the Heather Anderson Award for bold use of color was won by Ellen Clark for Splendor.
Congratulations to all the winners and to everyone who participated in today's flower show. Please do go downstairs before you leave and make sure you see all the plants and flowers. I think the next thing on our agenda is, we've got a presentation to make. Diane, would you like to? Diane Gillen would like to make a presentation.
It's my great, can you hear me? Yeah. It's my great pleasure to present the Heather Anderson Award to Ellen Clark, who was a very good friend of Heather's.
Right. I think it is time now for, one moment, some announcements before the lucky draw. So if you haven't bought your tickets for the lucky draw, while as the people are coming up to make the announcements, perhaps you can buy your tickets. I would like to call on Eloise Carmichael to make an announcement from the travel committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. In past years, the Travel Committee has taken the Garden Club members on trips within Canada, including to Quebec, British Columbia, and Newfoundland. Next year, we hope to visit Alberta, which is one that we haven't gone to yet. It's a province with stunning natural beauty, and as well as very interesting gardens to explore. The trip will take place during mid-June 2023, starting and ending in Calgary. Points of interest as well as dates have not been finalized yet. We will let you know when we do finalize them, but travelers will be back before the end of June. We have space for 20 people, so if this trip interests you, please add your name to the sign-up sheet down at our table and join us in awesome Alberta. Thank you.
Next, I believe there is an announcement from Darlene Frampton, who has been chairing our 75th anniversary celebration year. Lots has been happening.
Thank you, Joy. I just wanted to say again, thanks to all of you who bought tickets, but we are sold out for our June luncheon on June the 8th. If you have a ticket, a space at the event, you have received a confirmation email. So if you haven't and you're concerned, you can check your name with us. We're going to be sending you almost like an agenda, where to park, what the garden tours are going to contain, what time to go to the gardens, what time the bar opens. That's the most important thing. So that will all come to you closer to the event in another email. But we'll also have copies here of the agenda at the main meeting. So if you don't look at email or have access to email, we'll be able to give you a program for the day. So now that we're well underway in the planning of that major members-only event and a real celebration for our membership, we are now starting to go to market with our public event, which is a symposium on inspiring change for a sustainable future. We're starting to sell tickets to members, family, and friends now, April and May, and then we're going to sell tickets to the public. We're hoping to attract a lot of public attention to the Garden Club of Toronto and what we do in sustainability and other activities. So this will be a big public event. We may sell out on that one too, so get your tickets early. And thank you all for your support of the 75th anniversary.
Thank you, Darlene. Right, okay, do we have, let's see, I think, Deborah, were you going to come and help me pull the names for the lucky draw? I think I have my glasses here that read the tickets. I hope people have had a chance to see this lovely cable wreath in this lovely little bird bath.
Because there's going to be a class on it on April.
Yes. Thank you. You beat me to it. I was just going to say, May 4th, there's a Living Wreath workshop, and there are still positions available. So if you'd like to sign up, see Rosemary. Rosemary, would you like to? She'd love to take your registration. All right. Thank you, everyone, for buying tickets today for the draw, and thank you also for people who made some wonderful donations. So I'm going to ask our guest speaker to draw. She doesn't have to worry about mixing them up too much because I managed to knock the basket off over before I got up here because I was so excited about the draw.
So should I just read the last four numbers or something?
And there are a total of 7 items back there. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to read the number, just the last 3 numbers. Is that good? Yeah. So the last three numbers of this winning ticket, 3, 3, oh, I have to read them all? Okay. 4, 9, 7, 3, 3, 3, 9. Yay! Seriously? Like, wow. I think it's rigged.
This one is yellow, and it's 497 3296. 497 3296.
Oh, there is someone. Renee. Is that you, Renee? Yay, Renee. Go get your prize, Renee. It's yours to keep, Renee.
Okay, this one is a blue ticket. 207864. Oh, okay. Congratulations.
Right down to the bottom. Okay. Again, a yellow ticket, 497 3320. 497 3320.
Just go to the raffle table and pick whatever you like.
It's another blue ticket. 207844. Oh, congratulations.
Yellow again, 497 3356. 497 3356. Can you take her? I'll repeat it one more time. 497 3356. Oh, another?
Anything starting with 14 would be nice.
497 3300.
That's it, Claudia? We're done. Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone.
Just before we go, I have a little basket here that I am going to present to Helen Skinner. This was in some ways my idea, is to make this seminar or this talk in her name. She doesn't want that. So I'm being a bad girl. So thank you so much, Helen, for all you have done for us, and here's a small tribute.